John had lived alone for many years. His house was a small wooden cabin, standing on a stretch of land that seemed endless. Around him were open fields, dusty trails, and hills that rose gently in the distance. His nearest neighbor was miles away, and the town was a long ride on his old horse. John had chosen this life long ago, after losing his family to time and circumstance. He preferred the quiet, the peace that came with being alone, and the freedom to do as he pleased without answering to anyone. Every morning, he woke before sunrise. The sky would be painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was crisp with the scent of earth and grass. John would feed his horses first, talking to them softly as he did. He had 3 horses: Blackie, a strong black stallion; Daisy, a gentle mare; and Rusty, an old but loyal horse who had been with him for years. He treated them like family because, in many ways, they were the closest thing he had to it. After tending the animals, he would move on to chores around the cabin and the land. He repaired fences, cleaned the yard, and made sure his tools were in order. He was careful, methodical, and proud of his work. He knew every inch of his property and every detail of his life, and he liked it that way. The days were long, but he felt satisfied when the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with gold and purple. Evenings were the hardest. After finishing his work, John would sit by the fireplace, reading old letters or journals he had kept over the years. These letters reminded him of his past, of friends and family who were no longer around. Sometimes, he would sit in silence, listening to the wind whisper through the trees or the occasional howl of a distant coyote. He had grown used to the quiet, but deep down, he felt the weight of solitude. The silence was comfortable yet lonely, a reminder that life had moved on while he stayed the same. One afternoon, as he was repairing a broken fence near the edge of his property, he noticed a dust cloud in the distance. At first, he thought it was another traveler passing through, which was rare, but not impossible. As the dust came closer, he saw 3 figures approaching. 3 women, walking steadily, carrying what looked like a small bundle. John's first instinct was caution. He had not seen strangers in years, and he was not used to having people around. His hand rested lightly on the handle of the hammer, ready to defend his space if needed. When the women reached his cabin, they looked tired and anxious. One of them, the eldest, spoke first, her voice calm but urgent. "Sir, we need help. Our car broke down miles back, and we have nowhere else to go. Please, can you help us?" She carried a small child in her arms, who looked up at John with wide, curious eyes. The other 2 women nodded quietly, clearly relying on her to speak. John hesitated. He had not welcomed visitors in years. His mind raced with questions. Could he trust them? Was it safe to let strangers into his home? He had spent so long alone that the idea of opening his door to anyone felt strange, almost dangerous. Yet, something in their eyes, honesty, fear, and a quiet hope stirred a feeling he had not felt in a long time. Compassion. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Come inside. You can rest here." The women exchanged grateful looks and followed him into the cabin. The air was tense, but polite. John led them to the small living area and offered them chairs. He went to the kitchen and brought out water and some bread he had saved from his last trip to town. The women accepted his offer with quiet thanks. The eldest introduced herself as Maria, and the others as Lila and Taya. The child's name was Little Sophie. They had been traveling to a nearby town to visit family when their car broke down in the middle of nowhere. They had been walking for miles, unsure if they would find anyone willing to help. John listened patiently as they explained, noticing the weariness in their faces and the determination in their voices. Over the next few hours, John offered them more than just water and food. He showed them the small cabin, explained how he kept his property, and even offered a place for Sophie to nap while they figured out their next steps. The women were respectful, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily, but John noticed the relief in their eyes. For the first time in a long while, his home felt alive with conversation and laughter, even if it was faint. As the day moved toward evening, John felt something unfamiliar. He realized he had been talking more than he had in years. He shared stories of his younger days as a cowboy, of adventures he had with friends long gone, and the lessons he had learned while living alone. The women listened intently, asking questions and laughing at his small jokes. The child, Sophie, toddled around the cabin, exploring every corner with innocent curiosity. That night, as the wind blew softly outside, John felt a strange comfort. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to connect with another human being. The women had come into his life unexpectedly, yet their presence brought warmth to his otherwise lonely existence. He watched them sleep, feeling a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. It was a reminder that life, no matter how isolated, could still bring surprises. The next morning, John woke early, as usual, and found the women already preparing a simple breakfast. Maria thanked him for his kindness, and the conversation flowed naturally as they shared stories about their lives. John realized that he had learned more about these strangers in a short time than he had about anyone else in years. He began to see them not as outsiders, but as individuals with courage, resilience, and kindness qualities he respected deeply. Over the following days, the women helped with small chores around the cabin. Lila collected firewood, Taya helped feed the animals, and Maria spent time with Sophie, teaching her small games and songs. John found himself appreciating their company more than he expected. It was different from having neighbors or friends in town. It was deeper, rooted in mutual respect and shared effort. He discovered that even someone who had lived alone for decades could find connection in unexpected ways. During this time, John reflected on his own life. He realized that solitude had shaped him, made him strong, and taught him self-reliance. But it had also left a void. He had built walls around himself, both physically and emotionally, and he had never imagined anyone breaking through them. Yet, here were three women who had done so simply by needing help and showing honesty. He also noticed subtle lessons in their presence. Maria's calm demeanor reminded him of patience. Lila's resourcefulness inspired him to be flexible, and Taya's laughter brought lightness to days that had felt heavy for too long. Even little Sophie, with her curiosity and trust, reminded John of the simple joys he had forgotten, like the joy of teaching someone to ride a horse or sharing a quiet moment by the fire. John had no immediate plans to change his life. He still valued his independence, and he still cherished the peace of his land. But he began to understand that life was richer when shared. The presence of the women did not diminish his freedom. Instead, it added layers of meaning he had not known he was missing. As the days went on, John began to anticipate their conversations and small acts of cooperation. He noticed himself smiling more, laughing more freely, and even looking forward to the evenings when they would sit together by the fire, sharing stories of the past and hopes for the future. The cabin, once a quiet refuge, had become a place of warmth, learning, and gentle companionship. For John, this was a revelation. He had believed that life alone was enough. But the unexpected visit of three strangers had shown him that connection, even temporary, could transform the world around him. It reminded him that life, like the open plains he had always loved, was vast and full of possibilities. And sometimes, those possibilities arrived at your door, dusty and tired, asking for nothing more than a chance to rest. By the end of the week, John was no longer just a solitary cowboy. He was a man beginning to understand the value of kindness, trust, and shared humanity. The women's presence had stirred something deep inside him, a hope, a sense of belonging, and the quiet joy of knowing that even the loneliest life could be touched by friendship. And so, life at the cabin continued, but it was no longer the same. The wind still whispered through the trees, the horses still grazed peacefully, and the sun still painted the sky with its morning colors. But now, John's heart had a new warmth, a new connection that promised more than solitude, it promised life. Days passed, and the bond between John and the three women grew stronger. The cabin, once quiet and lonely, was now filled with laughter, stories, and the gentle sounds of life shared. John had come to admire their resilience and courage. Maria, calm and wise, carried a quiet strength that reminded him of people he had once respected in his life. Lila was quick and practical, able to find solutions to problems with ease. Taya had a lightness about her that brought smiles even in hard moments. And little Sophie, with her curiosity and innocence, reminded John of the simple joys that he had long forgotten. They worked together on small tasks, and the process brought them closer. John showed them how to mend fences properly, how to care for the horses, and how to store supplies to last the harsh desert days. In return, the women shared their own knowledge. Maria taught him about herbs and plants that could help with minor injuries or keep illnesses away. Lila shared techniques to cook efficiently over a small fire, while Taya taught John simple songs and stories from their culture, full of wisdom and lessons that seemed to carry the strength of generations. John began to see the women not just as guests, but as companions. Their presence made the daily chores lighter and even enjoyable. The cabin, which had once echoed only with his own voice, now resonated with conversation, laughter, and shared effort. Even little Sophie would toddle around, offering a hand wherever she could, and John often found himself smiling at her antics. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, a dark cloud appeared on the horizon. John's years of experience taught him that a storm was coming. He could see the wind picking up, carrying dust and leaves, and he knew that the small cabin and their animals could be at risk if they were not prepared. He gathered Maria, Lila, and Taya to discuss their plan. Together, they worked quickly and efficiently, using the skills they had shared over the past few days. The women carried water to secure containers, helped reinforce the fences, and gathered the horses in the stables. John felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. Their teamwork was seamless, their courage unshaken. Even Sophie, though small, stayed close and helped in little ways, carrying sticks or holding tools. It was a moment of unity, showing John that people could come together in ways he had not imagined, even when the circumstances were difficult. When the storm finally hit, it was strong, with winds that shook the cabin and rain that fell in sheets. But inside, John and the women were safe. They checked on the animals, made sure the fire kept burning, and shared stories to pass the time. The storm raged outside, but inside, there was warmth, safety, and trust. For John, it was a revelation. He had always faced the harsh elements alone, but now, he realized that facing challenges with others was not a sign of weakness. It was strength. After the storm passed, the group stepped outside to assess the damage. Trees had fallen, fences had been broken, and the ground was muddy. But nothing was lost that could not be fixed. Together, they repaired what they could, and John noticed a change in himself. He no longer felt the same isolation he had grown used to. He had learned that connection, even temporary, could provide strength and resilience in ways he had never known. The following days continued in a similar pattern. With work, stories, and shared experiences, John began to open up more than he had in years. He spoke of his past, of dreams that had been unfulfilled, and of regrets he had carried silently. Maria, Lila, and Taya listened without judgment, offering understanding and comfort. Through their presence, John felt a sense of belonging that he had not thought possible. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, John watched little Sophie play with the horses. He realized how much he had missed the simple joys of life, teaching, guiding, and sharing small moments with others. He felt a warmth in his heart, a feeling that solitude had never given him. It was a reminder that life could change, sometimes suddenly and unexpectedly, and that even a life spent alone could be touched by friendship and trust. The women were preparing to continue their journey. Their car finally repaired and ready to take them to their destination. John felt a mixture of emotions. He was happy for them, proud of the bond they had shared, but also a little wistful. The cabin would be quieter once again, and he knew he would miss their laughter and companionship. Yet, he also understood that this experience had changed him permanently. Before they left, Maria spoke softly to John. "Thank you for your kindness," she said. "You have taught us that even in the quietest places, there is strength in helping others, and there is value in opening your heart." John nodded, realizing the truth in her words. Lila and Taya added their own thanks, and little Sophie hugged him tightly, leaving a mark on his heart that he would never forget. When the women finally departed, John stood on his porch, watching them disappear into the distance. The wind carried the scent of the desert, the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, and the horses grazed peacefully in the fields. For a moment, he felt the old loneliness creeping back, but it was different now. It was not heavy or oppressive. Instead, it was a reminder of the life he had lived and the connections he had found along the way. John realized that life, no matter how long one has spent alone, could always bring new experiences, friendships, and lessons. He understood that solitude had its place, but human connection brought a richness that could not be found in isolation. He had learned to balance his independence with openness, to protect his life and land while also welcoming the unexpected joys of companionship. The cabin, once silent and lonely, now held memories of laughter, shared work, and trust. John felt grateful for the time spent with Maria, Lila, Taya, and little Sophie. Their presence had reminded him of the value of helping others, the strength of shared effort, and the quiet joy that comes from simple human connection. As the days passed, John returned to his routine, feeding the horses, repairing fences, and maintaining the land. But now, his heart carried warmth and hope. He remembered the lessons the women had taught him, the stories they had shared, and the bond they had formed. He knew that even in solitude, life could be full of surprises, kindness, and friendship. John continued to live on his ranch, but he was no longer the same man who had welcomed strangers reluctantly. He had learned to open his heart, to appreciate the value of connection, and to find joy in both work and companionship. The experience had transformed him, leaving him stronger, wiser, and more aware of the richness life could offer. And so, John's life continued on the open plains, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the memories of new friendships. He had learned that even the most solitary life could be touched by unexpected kindness, and that the world, no matter how vast and quiet, always held the possibility of connection. The cabin remained his home, the horses his companions, and the lessons he had learned with the three women would stay with him forever. John looked out over the land each evening, the sun setting in brilliant colors. He felt peace, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the peace that comes from knowing that life had brought him something precious, a reminder that no one truly has to live in complete solitude, and that even the simplest acts of kindness can change a life forever.